After Silent Hill 2 saw low sales in Japan, Silent Hill 3 and 4 would see a lot of changes. As I stated in my last video, at one point, Silent Hill 3 was being developed as an on-rail shooter, while it would pivot back into the more familiar territory of Silent Hill. The fourth game, which was being developed at the same time, would feel very different to the other games. The game is a lot more action-oriented than the last games and has toned down the psychological aspect. It would also be the last game Team Silent would ever release. I will get into all the ways the game is different to the previous ones later in the video. The game would finally release in 2004 for the PlayStation 2, but see an Xbox and PC release later in September, although North America would get all versions at the same time. So, what is locked behind Silent Hill 4 The Room? Let's find out. Silent Hill 4 starts with our protagonist once again waking up from a bad dream. The intro of the game this time pans all around the apartment, giving us a proper view of where Henry has been living. He has been plagued by these nightmares for the past week. Leaving the bedroom, we discover that his troubles are not only limited to the nightmares, as he has been locked inside his own apartment for the last 5 days as well, with large chains all over his door, preventing him from physically going outside. Later, we will also see that they are supernatural in nature, somehow muting Henry to the outside world, as even when he bangs and shouts, no one can hear him on the other side. They do not stop him from observing outside though, so we can take a look at a very normal looking urban neighborhood outside Henry's windows, where the camera highlights a woman going into the subway across the street. On that day, however, there is finally some change as he hears a thud in his bathroom and discovers a mysterious hole has appeared. Normally, climbing into such a hole would be a really bad decision, much less in a Silent Hill game, but Henry is feeling a bit desperate, so he climbs through, hoping it leads outside. It instead leads him into the subway, which is empty. As Heather would be able to tell you, that is never a good sign. As we explore the subway, we run into a woman named Cynthia, who's the same woman we just saw going into the subway earlier. She tags along with us, but runs into the bathroom when she feels sick. As we wait for her to return, a couple of dog enemies attack Henry, so we run into the bathroom where Cynthia is nowhere to be found. But there is another hole in the wall of the bathroom. Henry climbs inside, and we somehow find ourselves back in our apartment. Did Henry have a weird dream? It would seem so, as we just woke up, but the phone rings and Cynthia's voice on the other end calls out to Henry to find her again. We can also explore the apartment that has changed a little since our trip, including new notes that are regularly slipped under our door. Henry also discovers that there is a hole in the wall that looks into the room of his next door neighbor, Eileen. Traveling back through the hole in the bathroom, we end up back in the subway, but with a spooky new addition this time. Grabbing the coin in its hand, we make our way down to the platform. We are reunited with Cynthia, but just as quickly lose her again. Henry is forced up the escalators in what is easily the most frustrating section of these games, as enemies constantly pop out of the walls and knock you back down. We finally find Cynthia in the ticket booth, where she lies dying, but still thinks that this is just a dream. In a touching scene, Henry gently reassures her that she is indeed in a dream and holds her as she dies. The camera then zooms in to show numbers carved on her. Henry wakes up back in his apartment, and when he looks out the windows, an ambulance can be seen at the entrance of the subway, meaning that our adventures were not a simple dream. Upon examining the bathroom hole, Henry notes that it has grown in size. Crawling through it, Henry wakes up in a forest this time, and as we will later come to find out, they're located right outside Silent Hill. Moving a bit further, Henry comes across a guy sitting and muttering incoherently. A little further up the path is an orphanage named Wish House. The door is locked, so we have to find a key to get inside. As we continue to explore the forest around the orphanage, we come across a little child wandering around. The guy from earlier, whose name is Jasper, also shows up and starts calling us the third revelation. He leaves, warning that something big is going to happen, and the kid takes off as well. We later find Jasper in front of the orphanage, who gives us a shovel. This allows us to dig up a key, granting us access to the orphanage. Inside, we see Jasper again, although he is The numbers that were carved on Cynthia also show up on Jasper. Henry then wakes up back in his apartment, and upon investigating the hole in the bathroom, finds that it has continued to grow in size, with additional whispers being heard from the other side now. Crawling back inside, we are transported into a prison with a man locked in one of the cells. Since we can do nothing to help him at the moment, we run around solving puzzles and slowly piecing together the real purpose of this prison. It was used to detain children from Wish House, the orphanage that we visited earlier. This was of course done by the Order, as they were the ones who used this place to brainwash children into their cult. We can find bloodstains throughout the cells of the prison. We finally release the man from the cell earlier and end up in the basement of the prison, where we find him dead. As has happened, this prompts Henry to wake up back in his apartment, and going through the hole again brings him outside to a building where another character literally falls out of the sky. This is Richard. He is also from South Ashfield Heights and lives in the apartment opposite Henry's. They talk, and Richard goes off to explore on his own. We once again run into the kid from earlier, who is seen talking to a tall man in a trench coat, who reveals his name as Walter Sullivan, the very same Walter Sullivan who was mentioned in a memo in Silent Hill 2. When we catch up to Richard again, he's being electrocuted as the young Walter stands watching. The usual pattern of numbers can also be seen carved into him, and Henry wakes up yet again in his apartment. This time, the apartment starts acting even more erratic, with the dryer spitting out blood and the bathtub being filled with some kind of red liquid. Henry once again climbs through the hole, and this time ends up outside his apartment, although it has been twisted into an otherworld-looking place. Walter can be seen sitting on the stairs and hands us a doll, saying that it was given to him by Eileen. Choosing not to take the doll given by the serial killer, Henry explores the outside of the apartment, finding notes similar to the ones he had been receiving slipped under his door that allow him to find the key to Eileen's door. Unfortunately, he is too late, and Eileen is seen falling unconscious in front of the child version of Walter. Waking up back in our normal as it was, apartment, we find out that Eileen did not die and was instead hospitalized. The hole in the bathroom has also closed itself up, meaning we need to find another way out of here. Using the placards that we have been collecting throughout our playthrough, Henry is able to open another hole in the laundry room wall that brings us to Eileen's hospital room. When Henry tries bringing her back to his apartment through the portal, it does not work, and instead, we end up in the apartment alone. When using the portal, we go back through the hole again and find Eileen in the same room we left her in, meaning Henry has to find another way to bring her to safety. This involves having to run through the sections we have played through all over again, with slight differences this time. The victims of these scenarios also return as ghosts during the second run. We keep finding doors that bring us from one world to the next until we land up in room 302. During this, we piece together Walter's motives for killing people. It turns out he was following the directions of a ritual known as the 21 Sacraments. He grew up believing that the room he lived in, room 302, was his real mother, and the Order told him about the 21 Sacraments to raise mother. Believing that it was his own, he sought out to complete the ritual. The room 302 we entered isn't the apartment we have been in since the start of the game. It is how it looked in the past. A silhouette of the person who lived in the apartment before Henry shows up and gives him a pickaxe to use. We make our way back to our apartment using the pickaxe in the same spot we retrieved it back in the past to uncover a grisly sight: Walter's remains. It turns out he himself was one of the 21 sacraments, and that it is his spirit going around completing the rest of the ritual. Henry rummages around in his coat pockets, finding the keys of liberation. This allows us to finally break free of the chains on the door, letting us outside, only to find out we are still trapped inside Walter's projections. Eileen catches up to us as well, so we explore the apartments once again, finding an umbilical cord inside the superintendent's apartment. Eileen then starts acting oddly, expressing sympathy for Walter due to his abusive upbringing. Henry, meanwhile, makes his way back to the hidden room containing Walter's body. The body has disappeared, and in its place is a hole which Henry jumps into. That brings us to another room bathed in red light. Jumping down one more hole brings us to a large room with some kind of contraption in the middle. Eileen is here, walking towards the middle pool of blood, and in the furthest corner is Walter's true form, this giant creature. We have to fight and defeat Walter before Eileen is completely submerged into the pool of blood. After Walter finally dies, Henry is seen exiting the apartment, free of the nightmares. The game ends with him visiting Eileen in the hospital, where it is implied that they move out of South Ashfield, possibly moving in together, making the ending one of the lighter ones in the franchise. Silent Hill 4's story is another self-contained one. There are still nods to the previous games, with the superintendent of South Ashfield Heights being Frank Sunderland, James's father. Of course, Walter Sullivan was also name-dropped in Silent Hill 2. Interestingly though, the entirety of the game takes place away from the titular town of Silent Hill. The closest we ever get to the town is the woods that are located right outside of it, where Walter grew up in the orphanage. Overall, the story of Silent Hill 4 is still occult-themed, as Walter is trying to complete a ceremony devised by the cult to bring his mother to life. But the game had a lot more paranormal themes this time, with the addition of ghosts, something that the previous Silent Hill games never really delved into. Silent Hill 4 has 4 possible endings. In terms of its structure, it is actually quite similar to Silent Hill 1, with its good and bad endings and their plus counterparts. The two main criteria that determine what outcome you get is whether or not Eileen survived the ending boss fight and how many hauntings you cleared out of your room. Eileen surviving and having a room cleared of hauntings gives you the escape ending, while if Eileen dies, or if you have a room that is not cleared of hauntings, you get the Eileen dies or the mother ending respectively. If you fail to do both, you get the 21 Sacraments ending that sees Walter standing in room 302 after completing the ritual, as the realization that the cult was lying to him dawns on him. I have seen posts saying that people have trouble keeping Eileen alive. I personally have not had this problem in both of my playthroughs when attempting both escape and mother. The game gives a lot of leeway for her to get hit, and she can be left in a room or an area for a good amount of time as long as there aren't any enemies nearby. Due to both of these things, you really have to go out of your way to make sure she dies in your playthrough. This might be an issue on the higher difficulties, but on normal, I had no problem in keeping Eileen alive. Unfortunately, this time around, there is no UFO ending or any kind of joke ending in the game. There are in-game files that show that it was planned to be added, but was later scrapped. Silent Hill 4 has the largest cast of characters so far, with Henry, Eileen, each of the 4 victims, and Walter Sullivan. The victims do not get a lot of character development due to their limited amount of screen time. They mostly show off the characteristic that makes Walter hunt them down for the ritual, like Temptress for Cynthia, Wrath for Richard, and Watchfulness for Andrew DeSalvo. Andrew suffers the most, as all the horrific abuse he sentenced the kids to is only found in memos you can collect around the place. Silent Hill 4 is also not a study of the main character himself this time. Instead, the psyche of the villain is explored. Henry himself is essentially a blank slate of a character. He comes off as incredibly shy and barely has any reactions to the thing going around him. The most emotion we ever get out of the guy comes from him banging at the door in helplessness, or when he confronts a dying Cynthia. Compare this to the remarks Heather would constantly give throughout Silent Hill 3, and Henry starts feeling more like a player insert character instead of being one on his own. Walter Sullivan, on the other hand, is the real star of the show. His biological parents were abusive, as revealed by the voices of his father that play every time you collect a Walter statue near the end of the game. He ended up believing that Room 302 was his real mother and, spurred on by the cult's brainwashing, grew up believing that the 21 sacraments would bring his mother to life. In reality, it was the cult's god that it brought to life, meaning that even after her death, Dahlia had a backup plan in place. Silent Hill 4's visuals are a downgrade coming right off 3, which is still a strong contender for the best looking game on the PS2. The visual fidelity was lowered, likely due to the time constraints of the game. It is by no means a bad looking game, but you can take a look at the environments between games and easily see the difference side to side. The game has also ditched the iconic fog of the series. While Silent Hill 3 also drastically reduced the amount of fog, it did keep the thick fog whenever you got to the actual town. Maybe because you never step foot in the town, and the fact that you're mostly indoors throughout the whole playthrough, the fog is absent from the game. Dark sections of the game have also been removed, with it being mostly bright and well lit throughout the whole game. The biggest change in the presentation of the game is that the whole game now takes place in what would be called the Otherworld section. All of the worlds we visit are projections of Walter's mind. However, the Otherworld looks mostly normal during this time, as they are projections of locations significant to Walter. The woods he grew up in, the prison where he was locked, the shopping complex near South Ashfield Heights where he spent most of his time, and of course, South Ashfield Heights itself. The same familiarity of locations that was prevalent in Silent Hill 3 is carried over as well, because you explore recognizable settings that have been twisted into a horror form. The hospital section, while short, has some really creative and creepy rooms like one would see in an art house film. One of the especially standout ones is when you walk into a room to see a large Eileen head that constantly looks at Henry, following his movements. The usual appearance of the Otherworld does show up late in the game, only in the apartment section. The walls take on a fleshy mess-like texture that pulses as if it was alive. I would have liked it if, when you go through the worlds again, they were corrupted into the Otherworld-looking places rather than the same worlds all over again, as it made the entire second half of the game feel tedious. What made these changes even worse in my opinion though, were the gameplay changes. Akira Yamaoka once again returned to direct the music for Silent Hill 4. As has been the case, he knocked it out of the park. Silent Hill 4 features a really good ambient soundtrack. I really like the track Resting Comfortably, as it is an eerie, haunting track that fits perfectly well when you're exploring the apartments late in the game. Unlike last time, there are not that many vocal songs, which I do appreciate, as the ambient music is my preferred style for Silent Hill. Overall, I would still say Silent Hill 2 has my favorite tracks, but 4 does feature some good tracks as well. Silent Hill 4 radically changes the gameplay from the previous games. Let me start with the things that have stayed the same. Exploration is largely the same as previous games, with the head turn making another comeback. from the previous Silent Hill games. You once again pick up items and solve puzzles. The game also gives you the option to ditch tank controls for free movement, and I highly recommend turning that on for this game. The rest have seen massive changes though. As you might have noticed in the footage, whenever Henry is in his apartment, the camera switches to a first person perspective to move around and interact with objects. The second biggest alteration that you will notice is that the entire inventory system has been revamped. This game introduces limited inventory slots like Resident Evil, but it doesn't stop there. In Henry's apartment, you can find an item storage box to store your items in between worlds. For the first half of the game, before meeting up with Eileen, Henry also regains health whenever he goes back to his apartment, meaning it is better to save your healing items until the second half, where the passive healing is taken away. That leads nicely to another addition to the game. We now have a proper health bar that is visible in the top left. It wasn't unlockable in Silent Hill 3, but is now a permanent fixture. This is due to the fact that the status screen has been removed from the game. The health items themselves are nothing new. The limited inventory was not a hassle in the first half of the game, but it really did start to wear me out in the second half, where I would have to constantly take trips back to the apartment just to dump and take out items. As the game constantly keeps dumping items into your lap, hospital visit alone has around 13 items that can be obtained, and since you cannot carry that many, you will inevitably have to end up making a trip back to your apartment. It is even more frustrating when you finally reach a key item needed to progress the story, only to find out that your inventory is full, meaning you have to run all the way back to a portal to go back to your apartment, watch the cutscene, go dump your items in the storage, and finally make it back to where the key item was. And God forbid, there is an entire hallway of enemies that you have to go back and forth about 4 times now. What makes this even more frustrating is that for some reason, items are not stackable in your inventory. So, instead of picking up say 30 ammo for your handgun, you pick up 3 sets of 10. The same goes for health items. Most of my inventory was cluttered by ammo and healing items by the end of the game. In Resident Evil, the ammo occupies one single slot, while the healing items do not. You can also combine them in order to save space. This meant that if I did not want to run through 4 rooms to get back to a portal, I would instead have to waste the bullets in my inventory or use up a health item. This is a very easy fix that would have immensely cut down the amount of backtracking I ended up having to do. I will give credit where it is due though, as the inventory system is quick to use and you can equip and use items while playing instead of having to pause and go to a menu. Another change that the game makes is that there are no longer multiple save points scattered throughout the game. Instead, there is one singular save point located in room 302. This is a change I do not mind, as you do end up having to go back to your room often. So if you do end up needing to save, it is not as big of a hassle as you might expect. The changes do not stop there, as Silent Hill 4 ditches 2 items that have been staples since the first game: the radio and the flashlight. The flashlight is actually not needed in this game, as the environments you explore are sufficiently lit up. The radio takes on a different purpose in the game. It is located on a bookshelf in room 302 and occasionally gives you police reports of the crimes you witness in the different worlds. The radio static that signaled enemies does return, but only when the ghosts are on screen. I enjoyed the puzzles in Silent Hill 4. After how difficult the puzzles in Silent Hill 3 were, Silent Hill 4's puzzles felt like a breath of fresh air. The game also features creative puzzles, such as the one in the forest where you have to find a key by digging it up, but then it loops the next pathway as long as you keep it in your inventory. You have to then go back to your apartment to store the key and then retrieve it after coming back to the orphanage. This incorporates the gameplay mechanics into the puzzle solving, which I really appreciated. There are other puzzles, such as the one where the locked door in the bar can be unlocked using the last 4 digits on its phone number, which is actually visible from Henry's apartment. There is also a puzzle that presents more of a gameplay challenge, such as the one where you have to find all the doll parts in your second run through the forest world. But to actually be able to see and interact with all of these parts, you have to light a torch that burns for a short time. The two bosses in the game are also mostly puzzle oriented, but I will talk about them later. The game did remove the difficulty slider of the puzzle. I do not mind this change, as especially with Silent Hill 3, they just removed some puzzles on easy, while on hard, they were near impossible. The puzzle of combining two items has also been removed, which was sad, but still a necessity due to the limited inventory space. The total number of puzzles in the game have also been reduced. It is quite clear that the combat was the real focus of the game. The combat, like the gameplay, has also been changed since the last game. Although the core combat loop of downing an enemy to stomp on them remains unchanged, combat has been changed vastly to be much smoother than the previous games. It is also much easier than the previous games due to one simple mechanic, the charge up. If you hold the button down, it charges up a meter in the top left, right next to your health bar, and if fully charged, lets you perform a devastating attack that downs enemies. So far, that seems quite normal, but they added two small changes to it that essentially break the combat. The first is that you can attack while charging up. In fact, it helps build charge. When you have completed the charge attack, you are completely invincible throughout its whole animation. That is why the rusty axe you get about halfway through the game is the best weapon. Its charge up attack makes Henry move in the direction of the enemy by quite a good distance. I used it in the final boss fight, and it made the whole fight go by a lot quicker. The other changes to combat have to do with the weapons themselves. After Silent Hill 3 got rid of the hunting rifle, this game goes ahead and completely removes every firearm type, except handguns. You can get only 2 firearms throughout the whole game. The pistol located in your apartment, and Richard's revolver that you can find in his apartment. The pistol remains largely the same as previous games, although the damage it deals seems lower. Richard's revolver, on the other hand, can take down enemies in about one shot, so if I did end up using firearms, I mostly use the revolver. The changes to the combat still do not stop there, as the developers have added one more thing to the Silent Hill franchise: breakable weapons. Throughout the game, you can find golf clubs that break if they use them a lot, and then they sit in the inventory. This is also where I would have liked an option to dispose of items in my inventory, as sometimes they can be a real pain to carry around. If that wasn't enough, in the second half of the game, when you have Eileen with you, there are a couple of weapons she can equip to help her fight alongside you. If you give her the chain, she can legitimately help you take down most enemies in the area. After completing the game once, when you load into a new Fear game mode, you can also find a chainsaw, the only unlockable extra weapon for Henry, which did feel underwhelming after how many weapons Silent Hill 3 gave you on repeat playthroughs. Overall, Silent Hill 4 easily has the best combat of the series by a long shot. The enemies in Silent Hill 4 are actually the most unique of the bunch so far. You have the incredibly annoying dog enemies you first meet at the subway, which almost killed me the first time with how much damage they dealt. And then they put 3 of them in the first area. Kind of unfair if you ask me. The other enemies in the game are easier to deal with, like the gumheads and the twin victims, due to being much larger and slower compared to the dog. These are the normal enemies, however. Silent Hill 4 did add one more type of enemies in the game to really keep you on your toes: the ghosts. They are invulnerable enemies and cannot die no matter how much damage you do to them. They also deal damage to Henry by the mere presence. You do have ways to deal with them though. Firstly, you can run away quite easily, as they are quite slow by just floating around. Secondly, throughout the game, you can find consumable medallions that negate the damage that the ghosts do. They do break, but it takes quite a while for that to happen, and by the time it does, you will have found another one. I do want to highlight one enemy in particular, though, as they gave rise to the worst section of the game by far, the Wallmen. When you go through the subway, right before you reach Cynthia, you have to ride up an escalator with these things constantly popping up all the time. The game also barely gives you enough time to react, and if you're unlucky enough to be hit, you will be sent flying back down the stairs, and the Wallmen will appear once again to hit you. You have to go through this tunnel section 3 times throughout your game, only adding to the frustration that they cause. This entire thing feels like unnecessary padding rather than carefully designed as the previous Silent Hill game enemies were. Thankfully, the theme of tying enemy design to the psyche of the individual is still present in the game. Silent Hill 4 has enemy designs that are tuned to Walter Sullivan's psyche. They have a theme of motherhood, with the greedy worm enemy looking like an umbilical cord. He also has a fear of dogs from his childhood that manifested as the sniffer dog enemies. The patient enemies represent his hatred for his biological mother, as they have their lungs and wombs taken out. The twins he killed that led to his arrest, Billy and Miriam Locane, manifest themselves as the twin victims in this world. Overall, the enemy design leans closer to Silent Hill 1, as in that game, it was Alessa's fears that were manifested, not Harry's. Silent Hill 4 only has 2 bosses throughout the entire game. The first boss fight occurs nearly 80% into your playthrough of the game, before you reach the door leading to room 302 of the past. It is mostly a puzzle boss fight, as there are 12 wallmen, and you have to find the true wallman out of them, and hitting him a couple of times ends the boss fight. The other boss of the game is Walter Sullivan himself for the final fight. The boss fight is actually divided into 2 parts. Firstly, you have to use the umbilical cord on Walter's true form. Then you have to run around the arena, collecting spears to jam into him, all the while a shadowy, invulnerable version of Walter runs around the area. Once all 8 spears have been jammed into the main body, the shadow version of Walter becomes vulnerable to attacks. Once you kill him, the fight is over. That is quite a lot of things that they crammed into the boss fight, and you also have to remember to do all of this before Eileen walks into the pool of blood in the center of the arena, otherwise she dies. The game does feature mini bosses too. When you run back through the worlds, Walter's victims come back to haunt their respective worlds. The only one you really have to fight is Andrew DeSalvo, the caretaker of the prison, as he holds a key that you need to escape the world. Since they are ghosts, there is no way to actually kill them. Instead, what you have to do is damage them enough to where they fall to the ground, and then you can use a special item called the Sword of Obedience that will pin them to the ground, taking them out of commission as long as you do not remove the sword. There are only 5 of these swords located throughout the whole game though. I ended up using 3 of them on the ghosts of Cynthia, Andrew, and Richard. The game also gives you incredibly rare, and by that I mean only 3 of them in the entire game, ammo called silver bullets that will instantly knock a ghost in one shot. The third one requires a lot of backtracking though, so I ended up having only 2 of them by the end of the game. Overall, I quite liked the addition of the mini-bosses, especially with them being people you met earlier. Silent Hill 4 was a very different kind of game as compared to the last 3 games. I still think it is a good game, but I do not find myself going back to replay it unlike the previous 2 games of the series. I do miss the fact that there is not a UFO ending, as that alone would have made me start a second playthrough. Overall, I am quite mixed on the changes that they did to the gameplay in this game. While I enjoyed the combat in the game a lot more, the wallman sections and the aforementioned backtracking do not lend themselves well to replays. I still would say that Silent Hill 4 is a good game, but when compared to the other 3 games that came out before it, it does feel like a noticeable downgrade. The game is also very difficult to play nowadays, as Konami have not re-released it on any platform, meaning that it is locked on the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC. Overall, for its strengths and weaknesses, I will give Silent Hill 4 a 6.3 out of 10. Team Silent would be disbanded shortly after the game's release. There were plans for a sequel, but that would end up being cancelled by Konami along with the disbanding of the team. The series would continue though, as Konami began outsourcing development of new Silent Hill games to Western developers. These games would get middling to poor reviews and the series would be put on hold after the backlash Silent Hill Downpour would get. It would then take another decade until the release of Silent Hill 2 Remake in 2024. I have really enjoyed my time playing through the original 4 Silent Hill games. I would rank Silent Hill 2 as my favorite of the bunch, but each game brought a lot of unique flair to it. Do put it down in the comments. Which game was your favorite? I would love to hear your opinions, and if you guys end up liking the series, I might cover the Western developed titles someday. That is all for today. Thank you.